Welcome to Impact Signals, social impact at the scale of AI. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Sarah.
It's Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. This is episode 39. Today, we're asking the practitioner question. What can you actually deploy this week? We've got a flood AI that works without any local data, an operational satellite system watching Bangladesh and Myanmar in real time, and a live earthquake response in the Pacific. Let's start with something that could change how the entire global South approaches flood forecasting. A team at the University of Texas at Austin and Hydrotify LLC just published a study in Environmental Research Letters testing a class of AI called Time Series Foundational Models, TSFMs. One model in particular, called Sundial, nearly matched the performance of traditional flood models that were trained on decades of local river flow records. And here's the kicker. Sundial was trained on completely different data. Energy grids, transportation systems, climate time series. No hydrology at all.
This is significant because the data scarcity problem has been the wall that blocks flood forecasting in most of the places where it's needed most. Traditional LSTM models need 20, 30 years of gauge readings from actual rivers. Most of South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Central America simply don't have that. What the Sundial results suggest is that you might be able to bypass that requirement entirely, bring in a model trained on general time series patterns, apply it to a new basin, and get near comparable accuracy. The team tested across more than 500 U.S. river basins, and the model performed especially well in seasonal-dominated systems, like snowmelt-driven rivers.
Dr. Alexander Sun, who led the research, said that reliable water information is essential for community survival, and that these foundation models offer a viable path to securing it in data-scarce environments. For practitioners at National Meteorological Services or NGOs standing up early warning systems in low-resource settings, this opens a real pathway that didn't exist before. No waiting years to build a baseline dataset.
The question now is how quickly this approach gets embedded into tools that field teams can actually use, whether through Flood Hub, through National Meteorological Services, or through something new. But the proof of concept is there, and it's peer-reviewed.
Speaking of operational flood systems, China's Meteorological Administration just went live with the first imagery from Fengyun-4C, the satellite that powers MAZU, China's AI early warning platform. This isn't experimental infrastructure. MAZU is operational, and Fengyun-4C is now feeding it real-time atmospheric data across land, sea, air, and space.
What makes Fengyun-4C notable for this audience is the lightning imager. It's actively tracking convective storm cells across Bangladesh and Myanmar right now. Both countries sit at the top of the Global Vulnerability Index for floods and cyclones, and both have historically struggled to get timely early warning data. The satellite's interference-based vertical atmospheric sounder captures temperature layer data that feeds directly into global numerical weather prediction models, which means the improvements aren't just for China. They propagate out to the international models that humanitarian forecasters use.
And on the topic of real-time response, we actually have a live activation today. Relief Web is reporting a significant earthquake in Tonga as of this morning. The Global Disaster Alert and Coordination System, USGS, Tonga Geological Services, and UN OCHA have all been activated. DGECHO is monitoring.
Tonga is a useful reminder of where the Pacific Islands sit in the early warning ecosystem. GDAX uses automated machine learning algorithms that calculate disaster severity and expected humanitarian impact within minutes of an event. No human analyst needed to trigger the first wave of alerts. The question for the field is what happens in the hours that follow. The Pacific Islands remain one of the most under-resourced disaster zones globally in terms of response capacity. Getting the alert right is step one. Getting resources there is where the gap still is.
Let's shift to recovery, because today's editorial theme is about tools practitioners can actually use, and we've got two that belong in that category. First, UNDP ran a knowledge exchange with the government of Japan that presented case studies from Malawi and Argentina on digital wallets as foundational infrastructure for refugee and displaced population services.
The framing here is digital public infrastructure, the same concept behind India's Aadhaar identity system and UPI payment rails, but applied to humanitarian services. In Malawi, open standard digital wallets reduced administrative burden and identity fraud for aid recipients. In Argentina, the same approach widened access to social services for vulnerable populations. What both cases demonstrate is that this doesn't require proprietary systems or custom development. It's built on open standards that are cross-border interoperable. For organizations managing resettlement, cash assistance, or service access, from WFP to national social protection agencies, there's a replicable blueprint here. UNDP is treating these as digital public goods, which means the underlying tools are available for adaptation.
And the governance piece matters. Experts at the webinar were clear that the technology only works if consent mechanisms, purpose limitation, and accommodations for low digital literacy users are built in from the start, not added later.
That's the pattern we keep seeing across responsible deployments. The organizations doing this well are the ones who treat governance as a design constraint, not a compliance checkbox.
Second recovery story. ADA-NAPAD, the African Union Development Agency, is rolling out the Africa EdTech 2030 Vision and Plan, coordinating interoperable digital learning ecosystems across 55 African countries. The architecture is built entirely on open standards, digital public goods, and mobile-first platforms, specifically designed for low-bandwidth environments in crisis-affected communities.
The problem that Africa EdTech 2030 is trying to solve is the abandonment problem. Pilot funding comes in, a tool gets built, the grant period ends, and the code base gets orphaned. NAPAD's open standards approach is an attempt to make sustainability structural, rather than dependent on continuous external funding. Mobile first and locally trained. The goal is AI that reflects local languages and local realities, not models fine-tuned for North Atlantic contexts.
For practitioners in long-term recovery, particularly those working on education continuity in crisis-adjacent or disaster-affected settings, this is worth watching. Continental-scale institutional commitment is different from another pilot. One more item before events. The Gates Foundation has launched the AI for Giving Grand Challenge, with up to $150,000 available for organizations developing donor-facing AI tools. The specific focus is on tools that make philanthropic data more accurate, visible, and usable in AI-driven applications. For the humanitarian tech ecosystem, this is a direct funding pathway, especially for organizations working on impact reporting, data visualization, or donor engagement platforms.
Worth bookmarking if you're in that space. The $150K level is accessible for smaller teams, and the Gates focus on philanthropic data infrastructure is addressing a real bottleneck in how humanitarian funding flows actually get tracked and optimized.
On the calendar, the AAAI Spring Symposium on AI in Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Response is happening today through Wednesday at Stanford. That's a direct academic practitioner bridge, and if you're in the Bay Area, it's worth checking in. Coming up, RightsCon in Nairobi, March 28th through 30, with a strong humanitarian AI governance track. Then IAAP's Global Privacy Summit in Washington, April 1st through 3rd. And Action on Disaster Relief, ADR 2026, also in DC, April 8th through 10. That last one is practitioner-heavy and tends to produce real deployments, not just conference papers. That's Impact Signals for Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. If this briefing is useful, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out at impactsignals.ai and share it with someone working in the field.
Stay ready.